You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast hosted by Zach Bechtold and Matt Franks. If you'd like to find out more about the Bearded Theologians, you can go online at beardedtheologians.com, where you'll find all of our past podcasts and other blog posts that we have up, along with some other items that you can purchase to help support the Beardcast. So we hope you enjoy listening to this week's show. You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast hosted by Matt Franks
and Zach Bechtold. And today we have the most holy and right Reverend Matt Rawle with us. He's a new friend of ours. He's the lead pastor at Asbury United Methodist Church in Bossier City, Louisiana.
Yeah.
And Matt, thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Long time no see.
Right.
It's good to be here.
Yeah, I got to meet Matt in person this last week in Nashville, so that was a ton of fun.
It was fun. That was a good time.
It was a good time. So Matt, you tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of where you're from, what you do, what you're passionate about.
So I'm originally from the New Orleans area, which is that was a great childhood, man. That was a lot of fun. It's a great city, tons of fun. Always been in the United Methodist Church, baptized as a baby. And went to LSU for undergrad. So I got football taken care of in undergrad.
Yeah.
And then I went to Duke Divinity School for grad school. So I got basketball taken care of in grad school.
There you go.
Just hitting the important things.
Right. Right.
Make sure the extracurricular, not the education, is how I choose schools. And then, so I've been a pastor in Louisiana since I started as a youth director I was hired as 19 as a youth director. And you should never, ever do that, ever.
Nope.
But I made it out and answered a call to ministry and been in Louisiana ever since. Currently serving in North Louisiana, having a good time, living the dream with 4 kids in a minivan. So Christy and I, my wife, are never bored, ever. We have Isabel, who's 11. We call her the great negotiator, because everything's a negotiation. Yes. Anna Lee is our 9-year-old, and she is the great compromiser. She would give up her cookie if it meant people would get along.
Right.
And then Cecilia, or as we call her, Lady Cecilia. Her nickname is, she's 6 years old, so we call her Destructo. Her job is to kick over what anyone else has built. Cecilia's going to be a great CEO one day.
Right.
Because she has very definitive tastes, her way or the highway.
Yep.
But she's kind of pain in the butt to raise. Like, she's going to be a great adult one day. We just hope we all get there together.
Right.
We have Robert, who's 2.5. We call him Mr. Chill, because if you just keep him fed, like, he's good, man. He's just whatever.
Yeah.
So that's kind of our slice of life over here in Louisiana.
You literally just picked my family up, plus a kid. I only have 3, but plopped them in Louisiana, man. That's you described it to a T.
It is a textbook. Our household is a textbook of certainly what not to do in terms of raising children. Right. But it's there you go. We're just a study case for psychologists and therapists.
Right. Right. No, I love it, man. That's great. For someone who has 3 kids in a minivan, I'm right there with you.
I love my minivan.
Yeah,
dude,
it's great.
Automatic doors.
So practical.
Lifesaver. Yeah. Well, having an automatic door means I can yell at my kids from a distance. Like, I don't have to be at the van in order to do that. It saves some steps.
It does. That's good stuff.
So yeah, I've been writing for Abingdon Press since, I guess, 2015, which has been a lot of fun, a lot of work, but a really interesting practice, at least being in the parish and being a parent and kind of diving into that. So that's been tons of fun and still kind of pinching myself that whole thing happened. Weird how it happened. So I did a worship series on Doctor Who at one church I was serving, and I was leaving. I was being reappointed, so I think the senior pastor finally gave up and said, "Okay, you can do the Doctor Who thing, whatever that's supposed to be." And it was fantastic. We had a lot of fun. And one of my friends noticed that the University of Manchester was doing a Religion and Doctor Who Day for the 50th anniversary of the show, and said, "You should put your sermons together in a paper or whatever." So I did that, emailed it off, didn't hear anything. Then about, another rejection, that's cool. That's fine. And then about 3 months later, they emailed me saying, "Hey, we'd love for you to speak at our Religion and Doctor Who Day. We can't pay you anything." I'm like, "Don't worry. I'll figure that out."
Right.
So I, got some funding together. My wife and I went over there, and again, just kind of pinching myself that I was offering a religion and ethics discussion on their own television program, which was just kind of bonkers and weird, but great. Came back, and the local paper in Baton Rouge did a story on the Doctor Who worship series, and it literally crossed the desk of someone's email or someone's Facebook feed at Abingdon. And they said, well, that's different. That's weird. So they called me up, and like the rest is history. And that was just a fun, didn't solicit, didn't email or send out any manuscripts or whatever, just kind of did my thing, and social media took care of the rest.
Nice. It's always fun how some of this stuff just falls into place, right?
Totally.
I'm like you. I got hired as youth pastor at 19, right? That's the stupidest thing ever. But here we are, right?
That's it. We made it. We made it out.
Yeah.
That's why we don't have hair.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, some think it's a fashion choice. It's called stress and living. But now I have a natural halo wherever I go. When the lights are particularly bright, the holiness shines through.
That's right. I wear a hat so I don't blind people.
Yeah, I should wear hats. But.
No, that's awesome, man. So going through that, I mean, being really unintentionally getting into writing books and things like that, right? I mean, there's some intention there in sending some things out, but really getting that phone call. I mean, what's it like to go and be on someone else's turf and preach something you've written that they want to hear about, right? Because that's different than like going to a camp or going to a conference or a United Methodist conference, right?
Yeah, so like offering a sermon in person is one thing, because I'm very intentional about asking who the audience is. Yeah. Right. Not so much to, I hope I don't say something that's offensive or whatever, but just being able to know how to talk to people. What kind of images make sense? Do they like football? Do they appreciate political reform? Do they, where are they? Right. But then writing a book and you have no idea who's going to pick it up is a total different way of sharing the gospel and sharing your thoughts, and being able to grab the attention of a stranger is kind of bonkers and weird, which is why, because folks ask me all the time, like, how do I write? How do I do this? And, the number one, it's write what you know. Like, just start there. Like, write as who you are, write what you know, and you'll capture somebody at some point. So yeah, writing a book for a stranger is totally different than guest speaking or even preaching in your own context and congregation. Because we also live under the myth that all of our communities of faith are homogenous, right? And that there's no need for nuance. There's no need to choose language really correctly. And that's totally not true. So I have a church member, and this is fantastic. So his name's Mike, and he's great, wicked smart, bitingly hilarious. And so sometimes when I do like a perceived left-leaning sermon, and I try to stay in the center of all things. Like I love the Holy Center as best as I can. Or I'll say this, to proclaim the gospel, and however that falls into which box it falls into, like, so be it. So I gave what he thought was a particularly left-leaning sermon one day, and he called me in the narthex. He goes, "Preacher, you need to warn me when you're having one of those sermons so I can take what you say with a grain of salt." So the next Sunday before worship, I gave him a bag of salt before he came into worship. I said, "I just want you to be prepared, like, just in case, I want you to be." And then a couple of weeks later, I was giving a sermon, and he in real time texted me a picture of a salt mine, of a machine, like it was a GIF of a machine extracting salt out of a thing. And that's when it gets fun. Like when we can share the gospel, and like, we know we cancel each other out in a voting booth, but we're still getting good work done, and we're having a good time doing it. And we both know where each other are, and no one's getting offended, and we're doing good stuff. And I love that, particularly about my context here up north.
Yeah. I love those conversations in the receiving line after church where one person's like, "Pastor, you're meddling, you're meddling." And then the next person's like, "I love that. I needed it."
Exactly. One in a church I'd previously served, a woman, and I was the associate. So I preached like once on vacation day, or I call them naps. National Associate Pastor Sunday.
Yep.
Because that's what the congregation's doing. They're taking a nap. So like the Sunday after Easter, Memorial Day weekend, that kind of a deal.
Yep.
So I preached like 4 times a year. And there's this one lady who just came up to me. She goes, "You changed my life today." And I eventually stopped her. I said, because she said it every time I preached.
Right.
I said, if that's true, then you're back to where you started. Because I've preached now 4 times. And if you've done an about face every time, you've now made the lap and you're back to where you know, I love those conversations after church because it's bonkers in terms of what people hear.
Yeah.
Which is I love recording. So we have a podcast, right? And it's just a recording of my sermon. And I love going back to that because people will say, I love how you said, fill in the blank, or, they'll quote me on Twitter. I'm like, I didn't say, you even used quotes, but I didn't even say that. And you put that in quotes, I hope it's a good quote, but I love those those conversations in real time with people, shaking a hand, and it's beautiful. It's good stuff.
It is.
So you have a new book out. You want to talk a little bit about it?
It's called the Gift of the Nutcracker, and it's an Advent study because kind of my shtick, like my game, my deal. Yeah, there it is. Beautiful blue cover designed by Angie Kaysen, who is my very, very great and dear friend, and I thank her for her artistry. Kind of my thing is write what you know, right? So what I know is pop culture. That's an easy ask for me. So kind of trying to find that intersection between culture and the church, however we're defining that, because culture simply is what we make of the world. God offers the raw ingredients, and whatever we cook up is culture: food, music, movies, literature, all of these things. And I love playing with the line between sacred and secular, or our perceived idea of sacred and secular, because I'm convinced that the difference between the two is function. Not something on high, but something, because it's bread and it's juice until it's blessed and broken. And then it becomes a sacred function of Christ's presence with us. So it's how we use these things. So the latest book is called The Gift of the Nutcracker. One, it's a familiar story. Like, even if you haven't read the original story, you have some kind of working knowledge. And I love trying to choose something that you don't have to explain. If you see a Nutcracker, you have some kind of working knowledge that it's a Christmas story. You've heard the ballet, or maybe you've seen the new Disney movie that's out, which is really cool. Like, every time I put a book out, like, Disney decides to do a movie along with it, which is super marketing that I don't have to do, which is incredible. Last time with the redemption of Scrooge, The Man Who Invented Christmas came out, which is just, I love when Disney does my own marketing for me. That's incredible. Right. So Gift of the Nutcracker looks at, because that story is in 4 beats, and Advent has 4 weeks, right? So it kind of writes itself on that level. It starts with Clara, and that's what captured me about the story, is the main character, Clara. She's a 12-year-old girl, and at the beginning of the story, she's on the outside looking in, and it's really about this transition from childhood to adolescence, right? So she's on the outside looking in. There's this grand party happening, and she's looking through a keyhole, and she's been told not to enter the party until the Christmas tree is lit. And I love that image of light is the signal that we can enter into the party. And talking about transition of a 12-year-old girl, just kind of diving into that, because I have an 11-year-old daughter, and there's something about that age. Like, you would have to pay me $100 million to be 12 years old again. Like, that is just, it's a bonkers state of life. It's just weird. Like, your body's doing things, your brain is doing things, the whole world looks at your parents all become, they become stupid all of a sudden. They were so smart, and now they don't know how to put their shoes on, this kind of a deal. And interestingly enough, the only story from Jesus's childhood we have is when he was 12 years old. And I find that fantastic, because there's this transitionary period where his parents don't know where he is. Mm-hmm. And for any parent of a teenager, exactly what that means, right? What has happened to my kid, right? They used to be sweet and nice, and out there yelling at me because I don't have ketchup in the fridge. Like, what is happening to my family? And we have this story in scripture of Jesus being 12, and his parents have lost him. God, there's a sermon in there already.
Right.
So they go and find him, and he's a bit snarky with them. Child, what have you done to us? Which, by the way, I think is the edited version of that. I learned a new word. It's called balderizing, and it means softening the tone of the language. Because Acts, the book of Acts, in large part is a balderizing of the tension between Peter and Paul, right? So it's written to kind of smooth that over a bit. Like Peter has the first half of the book, Paul has the second half of the book, and even though they had disagreements, they kind of did their thing, and it's great. So we have a balderizing of this, because there's no Jewish mother on the planet that after losing their son for 3 days would say, child, what have you done to us? It would be like growing up. I was walking home one day from school. I was in 5th grade, and I decided to stop at my friend's house and play Top Gun on Nintendo, which is one of the hardest games ever to play, only rivaled by, E.T. on the Atari, right? So it's impossible to land a plane on that game. So I was at his house for like 2.5 hours. Didn't tell anybody. This is the day before cell phones and stuff, and I started walking home, and it was about dinner time, and my mother was outside pacing the driveway. And I thought, how odd for my mother to be taking a walk at this time of day. And so I get there, and she runs to me, and she gives me the warmest hug I think I've ever received, followed by the swiftest spanking I think I've ever received. And it was one of those syllabic spankings with like every syllable, why did you do this to us? Right. So long story short, or long story long rather, I think like we have the edited version of this interaction between Mary and Jesus, child, what have you done to us? And Jesus is like snarky. He's a total 12-year-old. He's like, did you not know that I'd be in my Father's house?
Right.
Like, what the frick, Mom? Right. You should have known where we were, where I was. And then I love it because at the end of the story, it says, he went home and obeyed his parents. So I bet so. I bet that was a long walk back to Galilee that day, my friend. And then it says, and this is a good theological wrestling, right? Because sometimes, especially when we preach about the glory of Christ and Jesus being the Messiah, we tend to forget that he was also human, which is what I love about the Advent and Christmas story. It says that he grew in wisdom after that. And Jesus learned. Like, that's fantastic to think about. And the theological profound nature of Jesus being born, just that alone is bonkers and amazing, because Jesus had parents. And there are several things that God does that I put in the bozo category. Like, what a bozo idea for God to do. And one of them is having the Messiah be raised by parents. Because like, I know me as a parent, and we screw up all the time. It's just what kind of therapy your kids are going to have later. Right. And this idea that the savior of the cosmos, right? I have a very high picture of the meritorious work of Christ as a cosmic event, right? It changed everything. All things were reconciled. And all in the Greek means all, right? So like, it's a huge deal. And theologically, I like to think about this, especially on Christmas Eve, that God had to trust in humanity in order to save humanity. God gave Jesus to a couple of parents. And how vulnerable is that? How risky is that? It's like on the day of Pentecost, I mentioned this in Nashville, like, what a bozo idea to like pour out the Holy Spirit on regular people. Like, that's risky, because I work with regular people all day, and they're capable of extraordinary things and terrible things all at the same time. And what a vulnerable love God has. Right. And that's kind of where we start with the gift of the Nutcracker, is this child going through a transition and trying to figure things out. And what a beautiful story that is with Clara. And I kind of end that first chapter in talking about silence, kind of a holy silence, because at the end of the beginning of the story, it's the middle of the night. She's just looking out the window, and there's this beautiful thing about silence in the mystery of Christmas. It's fascinating that in Luke, the Gospel of Luke, we don't hear anything from Joseph. He's completely silent. And then in Matthew, we don't hear anything from Mary. Right. She's completely silent. And the way I interpret that is, in those two stories, the faith of the other was enough. Joseph didn't need to say anything, because Mary said, be it unto me, your servant. And in Matthew, Mary doesn't have to say anything because Joseph has these dreams and is visited by angel. The faith of the other is enough. And what does that look like in Christmas? That's kind of where we start in the story of the gift of the Nutcracker. We move to Drosselmeyer in chapter 2, which is Clara's godfather. Interesting character. He does this puppet show. And if you've never read the story before, the puppet show foreshadows everything else that happens in the story, which is a very Advent thing to do. With the Hebrew scriptures of foreshadowing what this whole thing. I'm fascinated that when people talk about scripture in the New Testament, they're not talking about the New Testament because the New Testament wasn't there yet.
Right.
And when we talk about Christ being a fulfillment of the scriptures, they're talking about the Old Testament. And we don't do enough to dive, or me, right? I hate when preachers use the royal we. Like, you don't know me. You don't know my context. Stop saying, when we look at the world, this is what we see. Like, stop it. You're not in Shreveport. Like, what the heck? So let me rephrase that. I don't do enough diving into the Old Testament of how those Hebrew scriptures really point to who Jesus was and who Christ is. So we dive into that in chapter 2 of Drosselmeyer, who is this godfather figure. When the Nutcracker is broken, he fixes it. He's always there. He offers gifts, and he's always there in the background, like right when Clara needs him. And there's a powerful narrative there with who God is in this story. Chapter 3 of the book is about perspective and how Advent, I hope, changes our perspective in the world. Because there's this, it's one thing if you see a mouse run across your living room. It's a completely different thing if the mouse is twice as tall as you. Like, that's weird and intimidating. And there's this mouse king that comes out like to attack. And our perspective changes, I hope, in the season of Advent, especially when we get around like these bozo arguments that we get into over, someone said happy holidays. And like, now I'm all offended about that. Like, that's dumb. Like, why don't, like, saying thank you to them is a really great response to hearing happy holidays. Or as I like to say, sometimes we go into apologetics mode and we're always on the defense of our faith. But if we have apologetics without evangelism, if we're defending our faith without actually sharing it and living into it, we're building a wall that actually protects nothing. And look, it's like the song, oh my gosh. So I'm doing this thing on Twitter and Facebook right now of the top 31 worst Christmas songs. It's like an NCAA bracket of the worst, and you have to vote for the worst one each day. I'm a little behind. But like one of the songs is called Where's the Line to See Jesus? I don't know if you've heard this song. Where's the line to see Jesus? Is he here at the store? And I don't know why you're looking for Jesus in the Gap, but like, of course the line's short. Like, go to a church. The line's long there to see Jesus. And the video is the most troubling thing about it. You really do have to YouTube this. Where's the line to see Jesus? Because there's this child, and I see what they're trying to do. Like, there's this child that like peeks into the story to remind her about Jesus, and then she turns around and he disappears. But it's so poorly executed because it's this total Damien and Omen kind of thing that happens in this video. It's like the creepiest thing. He just said, where's the line to see Jesus? And like the kid like pops out and then like disappears. And it's just, it's so creepy and weird. So that's on my worst bracket of 30. And there's some great songs on that worst list. Like Daddy, Please Don't Get Drunk This Christmas by John Denver. There's a song called Christmas Eve, Burn It to the Ground, which is like a punk Christmas song. That's like, what? So you'll have to check that out on the Facebook and the Twitters, this list of terrible songs. Perspective matters, right? So this chapter 3 of Nutcracker is about our perspective and how I love, especially in the Gospel of Luke, how he flips power over. It starts in the days of Caesar Augustus, right? The whole world should be counted. And then there's like this laundry list of powerful folk until it gets to the baby Jesus at the end. So there's Emperor Augustus, Quirinius, Joseph, Mary, and then the baby Jesus. Interestingly, when he says all the world should be counted, all does not refer to the people who have power. Like Caesar didn't have to go and register. Quirinius didn't have to go and register. All the poor folk did. Which is interesting. And then in kind of Luke's own subversive way, Caesar and Quirinius aren't mentioned again at all in the story. Once you get to Jesus, the rung even goes lower because then you get to shepherds, which are even below. And then once the angels appear, the whole thing flips. literally in the story. It goes, so Augustus, Quirinius, Joseph, Mary, Jesus, shepherds, and then the angels appear, and then the shepherds go to see Jesus and Mary and Joseph. Like it's this total chiasm of power. And that's really great. I think Advent and Christmas and Christianity as a whole should shift our perspective. And then finally, chapter 4, if you stuck around long enough, we get to the actual Nutcracker in the story of being the greatest gift. He sacrifices himself to save Clara, and through that process becomes real, kind of like Pinocchio, becomes a real boy. But there's this idea of suffering, death, and resurrection that's in that narrative. And at the end of the story, the Nutcracker ushers her into a party where people from every nation on earth has gathered, which is a picture of heaven, right? There's this welcome. There's no lines of ethnicity. Everyone is there. And then kind of the closing scene, she sees Drosselmeyer in the distance. So he was there the whole time orchestrating this whole story. So yeah, that's a very long-winded explanation of what the gift of the Nutcracker is all about. And it's fun, right? So we have an Advent calendar that goes with it, sermon starters, because I know pastors, I know that life, and having a sermon starter where you can just look up, say, oh, fantastic, here's an outline. It'll make me look really professional. I can whip up a sermon, I have killer graphics, and I still have time to go have lunch with my friend. and like you seem super effective, and it's the least amount of work you've done all year. So right. We try to make it really easy for pastors to adopt it and to use it, and for individuals to pick it up and read it. It's not Karl Barth's dogmatics, right? You can pick it up, read it, and put it down, and go about your life. And that's kind of the slice of what that particular book is.
Well, and I love that, because what is Advent, right? Advent's this time of preparation and getting there. And if we're so bogged down in the trying to get there, we don't prepare, right? We're not in the right place. We're frustrated, we're stressed, we're mad at our family's mad at us. Nothing bright is going in the world. And then we get to Christmas and it's like, oh, we're not enjoying it. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And I love the sense of Advent, like you're preparing to wait, which is just kind of bonkers. Like you're doing all this preparation work to wait on Jesus. And I love, at the beginning of the book, we talk about how anticipation needs curiosity. Mm-hmm. If you know what the presents are under the tree, you're not nearly as excited to wait to open them, right? So there's this, and it's not curiosity about how Jesus's story details how he was born. Like we know that story. It's the holy curiosity of why it matters today. Mm-hmm. Like that's what I love about Advent, is that it's here and not yet. It's the perpetual curiosity of how God continues to work with humanity. Like that's also kind of a bozo idea. And I'm thankful and humbled that God hasn't said, you know what, y'all are screwed up. Like I'm totally done with y'all. I've been trying to do this for thousands of years, like trying to get you to not be jerks, and you're still doing it. So I'm going to now covet with frogs or whatever. Like he's just going to pick something else. And I don't know. But yeah, I love that, the anticipation. We try to make it easy so that you can kind of live into that. Mm-hmm. And hopefully pastors, like if they use this, they can actually jump into the meaning of Advent, which is waiting and slowing down and surrounding yourself with mystery, instead mm-hmm. of making sure that the Advent candles are full. Is my liturgist going to show up? You know, all of these other bozo things that we have to do during the season. So we try to make it easy so that folks can actually live into what Advent is about.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's something I love about Advent, is it's so countercultural, right? The culture is saying, go, 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 hurry, hurry, hurry. You know, we got to get to this point, and we got to get there now and hard and fast. And it's got to be the best thing ever. Right. Where Advent says, oh no, let's slow down.
Slow your roll. Yeah. Slow your roll.
Because what is coming is the greatest thing, right? Is hope, is all of these things. And let's wait to get there, because it's going to be good.
It's a waiting in the midst of preparation, right? So in Isaiah chapter 40, prepare the way of the Lord, it says. And we often prepare in lots of wrong ways for the coming of Christ. We prepare and fill our schedule with a bunch of stuff, mm-hmm. Instead of, I love that. Oh my gosh, Isaiah 40, when it says the mountains will be made low, rough places plain, prepare the way of the Lord. That's our work. it doesn't say God will make the mountains low. He's saying you prepare the way of the Lord, make the rough places plain, lower the mountains, lift the lowly up. And when that work is done, we can see Christ clearly. And that's the kind of work that we need to be doing in Advent, and let the rest of it be. Just let it be. Like, look, Jesus is going to be born, whether or not you stuff bulletins or not. Like,
right.
Jesus, let God take care of that.
Mm-hmm.
You prepare the way by making sure Christ is clearly seen
right.
in the season, and let the rest be.
Love it. I love it.
It's like when you're having a baby, the baby's going to be born, right? So, my wife read What to Expect When You're Expecting,
mm-hmm.
which really should be titled Paranoia 101, which is like, should I eat salmon? No, I shouldn't eat too much salmon. Like, I should drink this much water. Like, and I had a different version. I forget the title of it now, but it was like, hey, this week, your baby's the size of a buffalo wing, and it's like, oh, how cool is that? And like, your baby can now see light. So I was like eating buffalo wings, like while shining a light,
shining lights
to see if the baby would kick and this kind of thing. Like, and we could do, like, as parents, first-time parents, like, we do a lot of preparation, and there's a lot of good to that. But then we also do a lot of bonker preparation, like decorating a nursery. Like, the child doesn't know that there are giraffes on the wall, at least yet, but we like try to do all these things. And it's great, and it's important, and it brings people together. But sometimes, like, the baby's coming whether we've painted the nursery or not.
Right.
Christ is coming whether or not we've wrapped every gift just so. And I don't want to make light of decorating a nursery, because
mm-hmm.
that's important, right? To create a space. That's what hospitality is. It's creating a space for someone. But we tend to fill creating that space with a lot of things that don't ultimately matter. Can Christ be clearly seen in this preparation or not? That's a good barometer to check as we're getting ready for the season.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I love that analogy because we coming from the male perspective, right?
Sure,
we look at these things as we prepare for children, and if the diaper pail's not just in the right place, if the changing table is not right, the baby doesn't care, right? That's us. That's preparing for us. But we do the same thing in worship. The angels have to be here. Mary and Joseph have to be here. The wise man can't be in here until later. All of this stuff.
Move them in slowly as the
right.
story progresses.
Are the candles full? The bulletins there? All of these things. Is the music just right?
Right. And I'm totally right. So music, right? So we're doing a hanging of the green service, and I'm going bonkers over it because it's something new in our context, right? It's kind of this folk, not bluegrass, but kind of folk music. We use music by the Brilliants and Gungor and these kind of things, and we are rehearsing our pants off for this thing. And all of a sudden you kind of have to stop and say, Jesus will be present anyway.
Yeah.
And we've done the work. Let's just now live into it a bit and enjoy the blessing that God is trying to offer in the midst of changing key signatures and, tuning the cello and all this stuff. And living into the season.
It is. And it is that very thing is, I think as pastors, as people, we forget to live into this season,
right?
Inside worship, outside worship, wherever it is, it's really easy to get consumed into everything else.
Yeah,
but the hope there is Jesus is coming anyways. Right.
Well, that's why
that's the assumption. Yeah.
You need people that have no problem seeing the world burn and will do things that will cause it to burn. Right. I'm one of those people. Like, I have no problem. Like, I'll do things purposely just to see how people will respond. And then to be there like, no, dude, like, this is okay. Like, who cares if we lit the wrong flipping candle? They lit the other purple candle, not the other one. It's just trying to, it's amazing to me. And I think about that. I've been thinking about that a lot about Advent this year. I've been trying not to stress myself out about it, to not make it something that it's really not. But to keep this whole idea of preparation and focus on really what's the most important thing. And especially in my context right now, where we're struggling with hope. We're a congregation who is like a lot of our congregations on a drastic decline, and have more space than we know what to do with. And so the question I've been asking, especially the last few months, is how can we be a good neighbor, and how can we open our doors and ourselves up to the people around us? But then when we do that, realize that Jesus is going to be there. No matter how messy it is, no matter if they look like us or talk like us or act like us, or, who cares if they come into worship, not dressed like us. And so modeling that has been a little bit interesting and entertaining, and causing, sometimes being that holy agitator of orchestrating, like, that like when you do this is going to piss this person off, but you want to use it as a teaching moment for them to open themselves up what may actually, like, hey, like, this is why we do this, not because of, the number of chicken nuggets that the kid gets on his plate. We want to make sure that he's getting fed. And so, like, that's
Right,
the stuff that we have
to be a holy instigator. What would Jesus do? Well, flipping over the money changing tables is an option. Like it's
Right.
in there. And also, hope is such an interesting thing to think about, because hope in and of itself has no moral value. So hope needs help. So I could hope that my enemy burns. I could also hope that I find peace one day, right? So hope in and of itself, which is why in 1 Corinthians, Paul surrounds hope with faith and love. Faith, hope, and love literally surrounds hope with faith and love, because hope needs help. Looking at the equation, hope is a destination that we want to get to. Faith is trusting that destination is where God is calling us to be, and love is how we get there. It's with my background in youth ministry, like, this makes total sense to me. Hope is, we're going to Arizona for a mission trip. That's the destination. Faith is trusting that that's where God is calling us to be. Like, we're called to go to Arizona in the Navajo Nation. And then love is how we get there, right? Mm-hmm. Fundraising letters, packing lists, making sure we have the right tools with the right people at the right time. And so you have faith, hope, and love, which is why I love the not necessarily the order of the candles, right? Purple, pink, purple, white, and don't screw it up, or blue candles, which is just,
I'm a blue guy.
I'll pray for you. So, those other colors that Cokesbury invented. I love Cokesbury. Blue's not a liturgical color. Anyway, so but
it's very Germanic.
It's just that's fine. That's fine. You can go sing Elvis's Blue Christmas all you want.
Purple's better.
And then you have to, you have to sell additional vestments. Like, I understand, it's cool to make ends meet. Like, I'm in the game, right? I totally. But purple, pink, purple, white. But the peace, hope, love, and joy, and because I play with the order, right? With one exception. I always leave joy last, because joy is the steadfast assurance that God is with us. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily a happy feeling. It can be. Sometimes it's a sad feeling, like at the foot of the cross. Were you there? Joy is recognizing that in the midst of all things, God is with us. And I love ending the Advent season with joy, because we're about to celebrate and worship that God is with us in the flesh. The tabernacle is here, and will always be with us in the power of the Holy Spirit. So I love thinking about joy, and that's usually always my Christmas Eve sermon. Mm-hmm. Has something to do with the steadfast assurance that God is with us and how amazing this is. And it's not always a happy feeling, right? So like with O Little Town of Bethlehem, that is put in the right context, is a haunting song. Mm-hmm. Especially when you're talking about like the slaughter of the innocents in Matthew's gospel, where Herod ordered the murder of 2-year-olds everywhere in his kingdom. O little town of Bethlehem, how still we see thee lie. Mm-hmm. A dreamless sleep, the silent stars go by, and in thy dark streets their dark streets shineth an everlasting light. The hope and fears of all the years rest in thee tonight. That's haunting. Yeah. Especially if someone's going through something really difficult and it's not a happy time of the season for them. I lean into that hymn a lot. We do a longest night worship service the day before Christmas Eve. So we have a triduum of the story, right? So there's the longest night, there's Christmas Eve, and then Christmas Day we have carols and cocoa, where we sing Christmas songs, and it's just me and the guitar, and we give everybody else a day off. But that suffering, that joy, and then that steadfastness makes a really great trinity of worship services during the Advent season.
I'm so glad to hear that you're leaning into the other side of joy, right?
Yeah, sure.
I don't think we do that well, especially this time as a church, as a society, as anything, right?
Right.
One, we don't like to grieve in general, but especially now, it's Thanksgiving. We're supposed to be happy and thankful, and we lead into Christmas, and so we're supposed to be happy and ready for family and all of this stuff, right? And yet we have a multitude of people who are going through their first year without so-and-so at Thanksgiving, first year without so-and-so at Christmas, or it's their 5th or 10th or 20th year, and we forget that oh no, it's still painful. Oh no, it's still hard as we press into these seasons that we're supposed to put a smile on. But I'm sad. I'm grieving still in these moments, and man, that's tough. I think we I think those folks, our community around us, gets overlooked and puts a smile on their face and goes with it, and are sad.
I had a church member who, during the Advent season, she would always sit with her arms crossed during the hymns. And I finally asked her, like, you doing okay? Like, what's going on? Like, are you mad? And she for a year, more than a year, would say, I don't want to talk about it. Okay, fair enough, right? Eventually, she let me know that her dad died on Christmas Day. And I just can't imagine what that's like. Like, my God. And then I noticed, so after we had a longest night service, I noticed that instead of crossing her arms and remaining silent, she would weep through the hymns. And that's an example of crying is a good thing, because she was beginning to feel again. And that was really powerful. In fact, we had a family who the anniversary of the death of their 4-year-old is coming up in just a week. And I tell a story in The Gift of the Nutcracker about it, how it was a terrible car accident. And, I've not cried that hard with a family in a really long time. They worked, the doctors did the best they could for like 2 weeks on this child. And it's one of those things where this has the potential to destroy this family. And I've seen it before when both parents are empty and they're grieving, they can't comfort each other. And I was totally wrong. This is a family that, and I wrote about it in the book, it's humbling for me to see these people, and they didn't blame God. They didn't say like God just needed another angel. It wasn't any of those platitudes of, we're so happy that she's in heaven now. They were sad. They were really sad, but they also had a joy about them. They understood that God is still there, and God's heart broke with theirs, and they rested in that. And I can say, I think quite honestly, I had not seen that legitimately with my own eyes ever before, recognizing this family, because I left, in the funeral. Oh, Lord, have mercy. That, she would wear mismatched shoes. That was kind of her thing. And all of the kids at the funeral service were wearing mismatched shoes. And it just kind of takes the air out of the room. And you're thinking that this is going to destroy this family. And it totally didn't. And how grounded they are in recognizing what joy is.
Right.
Sometimes it can be happy, fa la 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 la. Or sometimes that's not the F word that leaves your mouth during the Christmas. and seeing them in real time rest in that was humbling and powerful as a ministry leader to see with my own eyes. That was really important.
I've encouraged my church this season. Go. Job sits in a pile of ashes and scrapes himself to find relief, right?
Yep.
And in those moments, there's deep despair and grief, but he's sitting in that pile of ashes knowing that there's hope, right? Knowing that there's something more beyond this. And that's my encouragement. I try to give my church's permission, go sit in that pile of ashes.
Yep.
If it's you that needs to sit there, go sit there. If you see somebody around you in your community, in your family, wherever, that's sitting there, go and sit with them. Don't say anything. Just go and sit with them.
Yeah, Job's friends got it right initially. They just sat with him and kept their mouth shut. Like, that's a good plan, often.
And then they spend X number of chapters
Yeah, then they put their
trying to fill
theologian
the
hat
void,
on.
right? Like we got to say
The
something.
danger of taking stuff out of context is eventually God rebuked all of what they said.
Mhm.
So like if you're quoting Job's friend and putting it on a bumper sticker as faith, you're actually quoting something that God eventually rebukes.
Right. He's like, no,
Like,
no.
no, God, your friends are morons. Like, so,
That's right.
but how did God get, because I think Job is as close as scripture gets to what depression looks like.
Yeah.
Like you said, he's scraping himself just to remind himself what it means to feel again.
Mhm.
And especially like being in youth ministry, like that resonates, that story resonates, and then God, out of the whirlwind,
Mhm.
gird up your loins and let me ask you some questions. And sometimes we see this as a heavy-handed answer, but then God says, were you there when I created the Leviathan? Were you there when I hung the stars? Were you there? What God is doing is taking Job on a tour of the most beautiful things that God can muster.
Right.
Look at the stars, look at the mountains, look at the depths of the ocean. Sometimes the only thing that can combat depression is beauty itself.
Yeah.
Another thing that, another thing that combats depression is like medicine, like going and seeing a doctor and talking to a professional about it. Like one of the worst things you could do to someone dealing with that is like snap out of it. Like it's Christmas. It's supposed to be a happy time. Sometimes our brain does weird things and we have to go talk to someone about it. And all of that is great. I am thankful that God created smart people who made great drugs, because sometimes it's just a chemical imbalance. But sometimes when it's not, sometimes the only thing we can offer and the only thing we're called to offer is beauty. What's the most beautiful thing we can muster? And like, for example, this family that's grieving over the death of their 4-year-old, to see their groundedness in understanding what joy actually is was beautiful.
Yeah.
Sad, terribly lamentable. I mean, it's just this, you're knee deep in sadness, but it was also beautiful at the same time. And sometimes we need to lean into that in the Advent season. Yeah.
No, that is beautiful. And the encouragement to lean into that is huge. That's something that's been on my heart the last year or so. It's just, let's lean into this.
Yep.
These words are important. These feelings are important. Telling everybody, or telling someone that it's going to be okay when in their mind and in their life, it's truly not going to be okay.
It's not going to be okay. So
it's the worst thing we can do, right? So let's own that. Let's name it and say, no, this may not be okay.
Yeah,
but
it gets better. It gets better. Well, it might not get better.
It might not. No.
So you know what? I'm going to walk with you
right
on this journey. I'm not going to give you a bumper sticker. I'm not going to give you the steel magnolias. You should just rejoice because Shelby's with her king. Well, call me selfish. I'd rather have Shelby here.
I'd rather have her here. Yeah,
that is a magnificent picture into the grief process. Just that real quick 2 minutes of film where there's grief, there's anger, there's denial, and then they want to punch Weezer in the face. It's like this is great picture of what grief. And then that scene, by the way, ends with them laughing.
Yeah.
Joy is there, but we have to walk through the valley, right? Not stay there, but walk through the valley, and knowing that God is with us with the rod and the staff to be with us, to prepare a table in the presence of our enemies. We're going to be eating one day with people we might not like, and that's called God's grace. And we might as well get good at it now. Speaking of Thanksgiving, right, which is we're right around the time of our eating with people. I shouldn't tell that story because he's a family member and he might hear this podcast. But there's a lot to be said for silence around the Thanksgiving table, of just not getting into it, just eating the turkey and enjoying the bounty that God has offered and going back home.
That's why I pray that my medication really kicks in that day and my ADD just like sedates me in a way
right,
where
man.
I just won't put my food in my mouth.
Let the tryptophan do its thing.
That's right.
And
this show will air during it'll go on Thanksgiving, and it will be a really good kickoff to really get everybody in the mood for Advent. And so those pastors that are listening that have yet to think about Advent, you have one more week to think about that. I would encourage you to look at Matt's book. And Zach's got it right there. If you
Cokesbury will ship it overnight.
And it's downloadable, man. You can download the ebook. You can download the video sessions. You can have it on your phone real quick.
And so, encourage you to take a look at that. And if you haven't gotten that far yet, shame on you, and you need to think about that and repent and work towards next year already. And he has several other books that you could do that with, to just go ahead and plan for next year.
The whole Matt Rawle librart.
Whole Matt Rawle library.
Slowly but surely, man. I could take care of all of your liturgical needs, brother. Start with one and move on. Yeah.
So we encourage you to look him up on wherever you buy your books. I'm sure they're there for the most part. If they're not, then you need to find a new place to buy your books. But go on our website at beardedtheologians.com. We'll have a link to some of his writings there, so you can check them out. Feel free to connect with us and share your thoughts on what you thought of today's episode through all the social medias. Check out Matt's social media on his Christmas thing and wreck that, because there's probably a song that you're not happy with that he's calling not a great Christmas song.
Oh, my mother was so offended because she's a big Paul McCartney fan, and I put Wonderful Christmas Time on there, and she didn't talk to me for a day. I was going to be named Paul. Right. But my last name is Rawle, and thank God she didn't do that to me. Paul Rawle is just awful. It's just awful.
That's great.
So this has been a great Beardcast for the week. So we encourage you to just check us out on beardedtheologians.com. It's a good time to go ahead and buy a coffee mug to give to a friend or a pastor who may need one for the Christmas season. And so just check us out. We've got a lot of other blog posts and other things going on. And so for the Bearded Theologians, I'm Matt Franks.
I'm Zach Bechtold. Thanks for checking us out.
We hope you've enjoyed the conversations that we've had today on the Bearded Theologians Beardcast, and we'd encourage you to continue those conversations online at beardedtheologians.com or on our Facebook page. We also hope that you pick up a couple of coffee mugs to satisfy your coffee mug collection. Have a good day.